the United States, land of the free, home of the brave, and birthplace of the McRib, which frankly should tell you all you need to know about the inherent contradictions baked into this country's DNA. We hold on to this image of ourselves as a beacon of prosperity and progress, a shining city on a hill. But let's be honest, folks, that hill, it's looking more and more like a rapidly melting glacier perched precariously atop a garbage fire. Because beneath the carefully curated Instagram filters and patriotic bunting, there lies a much darker, more unsettling reality. From chilling statistics to deeply uncomfortable truths, let's peel back the layers of denial and take a long, hard look at the horrifying side of the USA. Let's address the elephant, or rather, the heavily armed rhinoceros, in the room, shall we? The United States has a rather, let's say, complicated relationship with firearms. Some might even call it an unhealthy obsession, and by some, I mean pretty much every other developed nation on this planet. We're talking about a country where the right to own a gun, a tool designed to kill, is enshrined in the Constitution, right alongside freedom of speech and religion. The U.S. has one of the highest rates of gun violence in the world, with nearly 40,000 deaths annually. That's more gun deaths than many countries experience during actual wars. School shootings, thoughts and prayers, mass shootings at concerts, movie theaters, places of worship. Well, what can you do? It's about having an honest conversation about the devastating consequences of our love affair with firearms. Let's move on to a different kind of national crisis, one that's less about sudden explosive violence and more about a slow, agonizing decline. I'm talking about the opioid epidemic, a public health emergency that's been ravaging this country for decades. This crisis has touched the lives of millions of Americans, either directly or indirectly. It's a story of overprescription, corporate greed, and a healthcare system focused on profit. Pharmaceutical companies marketed highly addictive painkillers like OxyContin. People turned to heroin and fentanyl, which is 50 times stronger than heroin. Over 500,000 lives lost in the last 2 decades. Every day, more than 130 Americans die from opioid overdoses. For a country that loves to tout its exceptionalism, America sure does seem to have a knack for finding itself on the wrong side of Mother Nature's temper tantrums. From coast to coast, this country is a veritable buffet of natural disasters just waiting to happen. Hurricanes, check. Earthquakes, got those too. Wildfires that make you question if the apocalypse has already begun? Oh, you better believe it. In 2020 alone, the United States experienced over $22 billion natural disasters. Hurricanes that ripped through coastal communities, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. Wildfires that scorched millions of acres, turning once lush landscapes into barren wastelands. And tornadoes that tore through the heartland, leaving behind a path of destruction that looked like something out of a Michael Bay film. Climate change is no longer some abstract threat that we can kick down the road for future generations to deal with. The United States, a country that prides itself on freedom and justice, also holds another, far less flattering distinction. It has the highest incarceration rate in the world. That's right, folks. The land of the free is also the land of the locked up. We're talking about a country that houses roughly 25% of the world's prison population, despite accounting for only 5% of the global population. Every society needs a justice system, a way to hold people accountable for their actions. But there's something deeply unsettling about a system that seems more focused on punishment than on rehabilitation. We're talking about a system that disproportionately targets communities of color, that traps people in a cycle of poverty and incarceration. We're talking about millions of people separated from their families, denied their freedom, and subjected to conditions that are often inhumane. It's about recognizing that our current system is broken, ineffective, and morally bankrupt. Remember that whole land of opportunity thing? The idea that in America, anyone can achieve success through hard work and determination? Well, that dream is starting to resemble a delirious fever dream brought on by economic inequality. The gap between the haves and the have-nots has reached absurd levels. The richest 1% control more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. Millions struggle to make ends meet, working multiple jobs just to survive. The American dream is now about clinging desperately to the middle class. America, the land of pristine wilderness, majestic mountains, and horrendously polluted cities, our pursuit of progress has come at a steep environmental cost. The air we breathe, the water we drink, and the land we inhabit are all suffering. Air pollution in major cities contributes to over 100,000 premature deaths each year. From smog-choked valleys to communities poisoned by industrial waste, our air is hazardous. In the digital age, warfare has taken on a whole new meaning. Gone are the days of traditional battlefields and easily identifiable enemies. Today, the front lines are online, and the adversaries are often shadowy figures lurking in the darkest corners of the internet. When it comes to cyber warfare, the United States is a prime target. Our critical infrastructure, our financial systems, our very way of life, all depend on a complex web of interconnected networks. And those networks, as we've seen time and time again, are vulnerable to attack. Remember that time a major ransomware attack shut down one of the nation's largest pipelines, causing widespread fuel shortages and panic at the pumps? The threats are constantly evolving, requiring a coordinated, multifaceted approach. The forgotten faces of America, the homelessness crisis. Amidst all the talk of American exceptionalism and economic prosperity, it's easy to forget about the hundreds of thousands of Americans who experience a very different reality. On any given night, more than 580,000 people in this country are homeless, living on the streets, in shelters, or in their cars. That's more than the entire population of Wyoming, living without a place to call home. Homelessness isn't a new problem, but it's one that's been exacerbated by a number of factors, including the lack of affordable housing, mental health issues, and substance abuse. The faces of homelessness are diverse. We're talking about veterans who served our country only to find themselves struggling to survive on the streets. We're talking about families torn apart by economic hardship, forced to seek shelter wherever they can find it. The children left behind. America's child poverty shame. It's often said that children are our future, but what does it say about our priorities when millions of children in this country are growing up in poverty? Despite being one of the wealthiest nations on earth, the United States has a shameful child poverty rate. Nearly 11 million children living below the poverty line, struggling to access basic needs like food, shelter, and health care. These aren't just statistics, folks. These are real children, growing up in the shadows of one of the most prosperous nations on earth, denied opportunities that should be available to every child. The long-term consequences of child poverty are devastating. The weight of a nation America's obesity epidemic. Let's face it, folks, America has a bit of a weight problem. I'm talking about a full-blown obesity epidemic that's affecting millions of Americans and costing the healthcare system billions of dollars each year. Over 40% of adults are classified as obese, and rates of obesity-related diseases like heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes are skyrocketing. The causes of the obesity epidemic are complex and multifaceted. We're talking about a combination of factors including our sedentary lifestyles, our easy access to cheap processed foods, and our often dysfunctional relationship with food itself. We're bombarded with advertising for unhealthy food. Our communities are often designed in ways that discourage physical activity. Many people simply don't have access to affordable, healthy food options. The horrifying truth about America. A call to action. So there you have it. A glimpse into the underbelly of the American dream. A reality check on the state of the union. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, from gun violence to the opioid crisis, from our crumbling infrastructure to the ever-widening gap between the rich and the poor. It's enough to make you want to crawl under your weighted blanket, pour yourself a stiff drink, and pretend that the outside world doesn't exist. But here's the thing, folks, ignoring these problems won't make them go away. We need to face these challenges head-on, with honesty, courage, and a healthy dose of outrage. Because the alternative, my friends, is simply unacceptable.